Dr. Peterson, I wanted to bring up an article written in the Daily Cardinal, one of the campus newspapers, published this morning, a letter to the editor by an arm of the student government, the Legislative Affairs Committee, in which they make several claims, which I think you could easily refute, and what struck me as an attempt to slander you about things that happened with the C-16 bill and things like this. But they make the assertion that you essentially abuse or hide behind the banner of free speech in order to be safe or to allow yourself to continue or to not adopt the ideas about preferred pronouns, but I think this could be extended to all types of speech in which the radical left...
I wouldn't say I'm hiding behind the banner of free speech precisely. So that would be the first error in that. I don't think that you can characterize what I'm doing as hiding. It isn't exactly self-evident that the right to free speech has protected me. I would say a certain amount of good fortune, a certain amount of caution with my words, and a tremendous amount of public support is what's protected me. I also think that the ideological types who pen those pieces of nonsense have a constant theme is anyone who disagrees with them is pathological in some manner and uses the right of free speech to exercise that pathology. Well, no, that's not the case. It's not the case. And, most of what's being leveled at me in terms of slurs they're low resolution and ill-informed. I'm a transphobe, I'm a bigot, what else? I'm a racist. I'm a Nazi, that's a good one. I've been teaching about Nazism for 30 years, trying to tell people that they probably would have been Nazis had they been in Germany during the 1930s, and actually trying to convince them of that, which is something that you might need a trigger warning for before you enter the class. So it's palpably absurd, but it doesn't matter, because if the war of ideas is about power, it doesn't matter whether you represent either side with any degree of accuracy. It's just part of the Hobbesian nightmare, and whoever spins the best story wins. So, yeah. Anyways, I've been weirdly fortunate because every time the radicals have come after me, and they really came after me last October, it's reversed every single time. So, and I'm not counting on that to continue, but it's been rather blackly comical as it's been occurring. So, these articles, it's like, as far as I'm concerned, they're a dime a dozen. I don't even have to read them anymore. That's the thing about reading something an ideologue writes. You just have to look at the first sentence and infer the rest. That's true, man. It's actually, this is one of the things that Solzhenitsyn did a brilliant job of analyzing in the Gulag Archipelago. He said, that's the consequence of turning your God-given soul over to human dogma. You're just a puppet for these ideas that are operating behind the scenes. You think you have the ideas. It's like, think again. They have you, and they're doing with you what the ideas want to have done with you. And when they're done with you, they'll discard you, you can be sure. And you'll be lucky if there's anything left of you when that happens. So, and the universities are absolutely complicit in this. They take young people whose minds who are looking for an identity, and no wonder. And they teach them this algorithmic idiocy that anyone with any brain can learn in a week. The dictums and dogma of the oppression versus oppressed narrative. God, it's unbelievable. A decent chatbot could write most of the postmodern papers. That's why the typical humanities, 80% of humanities papers now garner 0 citations, which means the only person who ever reads them is the person who wrote them, and even they don't do a very good job of reading them. So, yeah.
Well, for starters, now I feel kind of terrible for writing that article. Well, I have to give credit where credit is due. It was co-written with others, and I would have hoped it would have come across as more of a thoughtful critique. Though it was written.
Are you actually serious?
Yes.
Oh.
But like
I'm sorry, I was a little hard on you. Actually, I would say I'm more hard on your professor
It's fine, I'm a glutton for punishment. But anyway,
It's very brave of you to be standing there.
my question isn't about that, but more about identity. Really, what you see then in the sense of thrownness is it's a consequence of human nature. Human nature creates hierarchies, and hierarchies exclude, or groups exclude, and it's necessary to sort. But what we see with a lot of the sorting is that it's arbitrary, and that it's not the arbitrariness of nature, but rather the arbitrariness of structures of society. Like, maybe nature lends itself to the creation of arbitrary structures within society, but then people self-identify with these categories, and these categories may be outdated or based on old understandings, or ultimately lead to greater estrangement. So the question is, how do people reckon with the parts of their identity that may or may not contribute to environments where people feel more estranged, more alone?
That's why you get educated. It's to separate the wheat from the chaff. Because you're a historical creature, right? I mean, it's outside of you and inside of you. And some of it's dead and corrupt, as you just said, and estranges for no reason, no functional reason, counterproductively. But until you understand the structures, for better or for worse, you're in no position to do anything but make them worse fundamentally. The purpose of a liberal education is not to turn you into an avatar of capitalism or of democracy, for that matter. The purpose of a liberal education is to enable you to comprehend the history in which you're embedded, and then to act as an agent to reconstruct and revitalize that hierarchy. But that's a serious matter. Like at 18, say, and right out of high school with no experience whatsoever in life and no real education, you're in absolutely no position whatsoever to be protesting about the structure of the Western world. It's like, no. So, your observations about the fact that people are alienated by structures, like, absolutely, of course, and it does sort, and it sorts harshly. And of course, because you're young, you tend to be sorted near the bottom, except that I would point out that you're young, and there's really something to that. And you might think that you have no power because of that, but I could say, well, you have all the power that use gives you, and that's not trivial. So, where power doesn't lie where it's obvious, it really doesn't. And people have more power than they think, but they squander it. They often squander it on ideology when they're not just wasting their time. So, anyways, it was very brave of you to stand up and ask me a question and to take all that.